It's Casey Berard from CaseyBerard.com, and today is Mindful Monday. So I'm doing a Mindful Monday series on sort of what happens when life falls apart. So my first one was on when you get a cold or when you have a virus or some sort of minor illness and how to manage that. Now, I want to move forward because one of the things that I think people don't realize when they see people doing videos or coaching or practicing spiritual things is they sort of go, "Oh, they probably have an easy life." That's sort of why they can put all those things into practice. Well, I just want to tell you that's not actually the case. I'm going to be sharing a few more stories in this series, and I hope it helps you because they're going to get, a bit more real and authentic. And I'm going to share really truthfully about how my life has not been perfect and how I use these spiritual practices to keep me from suffering and help me love my life. So, one of my major obstacles or challenges in my life has been anxiety and depression. And I've had post-traumatic stress linked to traumas in my life. These aren't minor things. These are things that can really bring you down. My first depression, I sort of went really low and plateaued and really low, but never really got up. And it lasted on or off for about 5 to 7 years, depending on sort of how you classify that timeline. And, it was triggered by a bunch of stuff in hindsight. But what I realize now is the reason that depression lasted so long was because I wasn't mindful at all. I wasn't using cognitive behavioral therapy. I very rarely used exercise. I did not want to use medication. I basically was poo-pooing all the 4 evidence-based things that help cure depression. And of course, with depression, I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to go out. I wanted to hide. So that was my first depression. It was kind of really horrible, and it took a really kind, loving doctor to finally sit me down and say, "Oh, you're so smart and you put on a good face, but like I see your pain underneath." And that really transformed things for me. So that particular depression made me very focused and very intent on staying in my own business because I never wanted to feel that way again, and on focusing on what's on my plate, what made me feel healthy. So I flipped into eating well. I flipped into exercise, meditation. I did actually use medication. My negative thinking and my ability to help myself was so low that even exercise and the thinking changes were not helping. So the medication just like broke the pathways in my brain and helped get them online. That works for some people. It doesn't work for other people. I'm not recommending medication or not recommending medication. I'm just saying talk about it, explore possibilities. Depending on where you're at, only you know what's right for you, okay? That's you staying in your own business, right? Now, mindfulness, oh my God, depression is so not about mindfulness. Depression is about being everywhere, but in the present moment. Now, I don't know if I told you at the beginning of this, just getting over a cold. And the reason I've chosen to film this stuff when I've had a cold is because I feel crappy. And when I feel crappy, I have easier access to my crappy memories. So I could talk about them. So I'm going to sound kind of funny. But I've mindfully chosen to do this in a really self-loving and self-care way because I really want to connect with that energy in a way that I'm not going to be attached to just that super empowered, super inspired energy, which, when you're depressed, seeing people who seem like they have life easy makes you feel so much worse, right? So I really wanted to be able to tap into that memory of what it feels like to feel like you have 600 tons weighing you down and someone telling you need to make little changes to move forward. And that really is what you do. As I said earlier, depression is something I've really researched. There's 4 evidence-based strategies that are proven to help cure depression or manage depression. 1 is medication, 2 is cognitive behavioral therapy, 3 is mindfulness, and 4 is exercise, okay? They can all be used individually you can use them all together. I actually use cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, and exercise to make sure I don't go back into depression. Okay, so my first depression, was one thing. Fast forward years later, over the course of 3 years, I separated, I moved twice and sold a house and purged. I lost the career that I'd had for 14 and a half years, went through a human rights tribunal. These are just the tip of the icebergs. Actually, when I went to my cognitive behavioral therapy course again, I checked off all 25 life events that could potentially trigger depression, and I had them basically all happen in 3 years. So that offered me a lot of compassion because, I didn't just like unconsciously slip into this. It was like things just kept piling on top of me, and I didn't even realize it. And one of the other core things was that I realized that I'd lost almost all of my identities and I needed to reinvent myself. And quite honestly, in hindsight, that was overwhelming. I didn't know where to start. So the reason I'm doing this video is to tell you how staying in your own business, mindfulness, and focusing on what's on your plate can help you in really challenging health crisis like depression or anxiety. So what was my business when I was depressed this next time? Number one, it was honoring and acknowledging that I was and that I needed help. Mindfully, I knew when I dug through that slimy, heavy weight of depression, I knew what had helped me the last time. This time I actually approached a holistic nutritionist because I didn't have those resources like 15 years ago the first time. And I enacted a whole bunch of resources that I didn't have that helped me from the medication perspective and did it a very natural way. Oh, you know what? I don't want to use the word natural. I want to say that I did it in a way that felt really good to who I was and where I was in my life at that time. Okay? Cross out natural. It's such a BS word. And then I really focused on what was on my plate. So interestingly, most people who have depression have a plate that's like piled super high and they don't even know who they are anymore. They don't even know what they want to eat anymore. You have to dump that plate. You have to get really clear that your self-care is super important. So my plate at that time looked like kids, work, and self-care. And I committed to that for 3 months. Nothing else mattered. I did not have the capacity to date. I did not call my friends. If they called me, I totally jumped on it. And luckily I have really amazing established friendships. I'll have to do a video on that later because that's super important. But that was how I managed using these principles to get super healthy, and really honestly within 2 weeks of really focusing on what was on my plate, and it turned the depression and the anxiety around because I had put so many things in place to support me and stabilize me at a pace that I could handle. I didn't go and run a marathon. I went, I'm going to walk around the block, right? I started small and I started training, and by the end of 3 months, it was amazing. It was night and day. People noticed a difference. I noticed a difference, and I was re-inspired by life. So that's how mindfulness can help you in a more intense health crisis or life crisis, specifically with depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. I do recommend, and I still was supervised by both Western medical practitioners and alternative healthcare practitioners working together as a team. I did not do it alone, and that's a really important thing to remember too. I had lots of help and support, okay? If you have questions, you want to know more about this video or specific things that I mentioned, let me know. I'll do another video on it, okay? And please share if this helped you. It might help someone else. Or you never know, there might be someone who is suffering from anxiety, depression, or post-traumatic stress syndrome, and they just don't even know where to start. So hearing someone else who's been there can be really helpful. Just knowing that they're not alone can sometimes be the first step in going, someone else did it. I can do it too. Okay? Lots of love to you. I hope you have a great Mindful Monday.